Hello, my name is Kyle Myers. Welcome to my channel. And today I'm going to tell you guys how meditation has changed my life. And in order to kind of explain this, I am going to have to go back in time. So if you are interested in just what really meditation can do for you or has done for other people, I really suggest you stick around to the end. But my story begins in somewhere between 2013 and 2014. And it's important to understand that during this point in time, I was playing poker professionally, so I was just kind of beginning to travel the world and go play these different poker tournaments, and it's something that I was working at for a very long time. I believe at this point I was about 6 years into this process, maybe a little more, and things were really starting to take off for me. So I was really starting to get some good results, starting to cash in some big tournaments around the world, and I was really seeing what poker could do for me as far as living this kind of crazy, beautiful, fun, adventurous lifestyle that I kind of created, where I would go and I would fly to Barcelona and I'd be playing in these tournaments for a month, and then I'd come home and I'd be playing online, going to the casino, and then I go to Vegas or Bahamas, and things were just going really well. And my friend invited me over to dinner, which was fun. We went there, a big group of us. We kind of did this on a regular basis where we would have good conversations, we would have good meals, a couple drinks, and usually we'd end up talking about poker. But this particular time, he had a family friend over, and I did not know at the time, but he was a meditation instructor. And this guy just seemed incredibly interesting. He was telling us different stories about his life. He was running different ceremonies. I believe it was peyote in these like caves in the desert. And he was telling us all these unique stories about different things that kind of helped him in life. And then later on, I think it wasn't even until a couple days after this night, we found out that he was a meditation instructor. But this guy just kind of holded our attention the whole night, and he kind of had something that I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I noticed that he was just kind of different. He was just extremely present. He was extremely just engaged in whatever was going on. There didn't seem to be like these thoughts of how people perceived him. He was just speaking very elegantly and consciously. And yeah, I got really interested. So a couple nights after this dinner, I got his contact information and I messaged him. And during the time, very similar to all the different things I've explored in my life, I thought that this was just going to be a tool that I could use to help me propel my poker career forward. So I messaged him telling him that I was meditating on my own, but I wanted some guidance and I wanted to develop better skills that could help me at poker. Poker is such a mental game, and I heard people talk about the benefits of meditation, so I thought it was another tool that I could use that would help me in my career. So I started having conversations with him, and this guy was incredibly present, but just incredibly giving. He would invite me over to his house. We'd have these meditation sessions. He'd give me books to read, and he would ask me at the end of these sessions, how I was feeling, what I was thinking. And it was the first time in my life that someone was guiding me through a process of using my mind. And I still remember when he first asked me, he's like, "What is your history with meditation?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I meditate all the time." So what I do is I'll picture myself in the future, visualizing what I want to happen, and I'll keep adding pieces of the puzzle together. I'll keep building on that image. So at that time, this was me hosting trophies and winning lots of poker chips and having money fall from the sky at me. and going out and climbing mountains and just doing all these different things. And I told him that when I had negative thoughts, thoughts that I didn't want, that I had this thing where I was taking the thoughts, I was like wrapping them up in a piece of paper, putting that in a box, chaining the box up, throwing it in the middle of the ocean, and then like blowing it up with like a bazooka. Like I had this crazy process of eliminating negative thoughts and just only trying to concentrate on positive thoughts. And I explained this to him, and he was like, he's like, yeah, that's very creative, Kyle. That's very creative. But let's try something a little different. And unbeknownst to me, I slowly found out that what I was doing was visualization. I was not meditating. And what he gave me the space to do was to sit there and allow thoughts to come in and to come out and not label them as positive or negative, but just to label them as thinking. So I would sit there, I would just breathe deeply, and the way he explained it was, sometimes you're going to be in an ocean and there's going to be a huge bull shark right in your face. And sometimes there's going to be an itty-bitty goldfish. And the itty-bitty goldfishes don't tend to disrupt our thought patterns, don't tend to disturb us in any manner. But when there's a big-ass bull shark in your face, that's going to cause some discomfort. So looking at thoughts like this, but understanding that the goldfish is just the same as the bull shark, that they are both just thoughts, you're just thinking, you're just a conscious being, and slowly I would add time on how long I would meditate for. So he had me start off with 5 minutes a day, then it was 10, then it was 15, 20, and so on and so forth. And as I did this, it was very tough at first. Thoughts were just being bombarded in my brain. And it's very interesting because when you first start meditation, for me at least, it's like you're unaware that you're thinking all the time. You're unaware that there's all these thoughts going in and out of your mind. And then you tend to hit a point where you become conscious of the thoughts that are happening. And once that happens, you're like, oh my God, like, I'm insane. Like, I'm freaking crazy. Like, this is a dialogue that's been going on my entire life that I've never kind of consciously observed. And sometimes you're kind of aware of it, sometimes you're not. But I went through this process, and slowly I became aware of what was going on, and many different things happened. But I think the best way of explaining this is just to explain what kind of started happening in my life. So as I was meditating, and I started getting spaces where thoughts weren't coming in. And this feels very good, and sometimes it doesn't feel like anything. And as this was happening, I could kind of see myself change. And it's a very slow, gradual process, but I began to become conscious of different fears that I had, different ambitions that I kind of forgot about. And one thing that I began doing was creating a list of fears and then going out and conquering them. And I wasn't aware of what I was doing at the time. I wasn't aware of how this human was helping me so much in my life. But what happened was I was beginning this kind of spiritual journey without ever really knowing it. I went to him with the purpose of getting better at poker, and I left with a completely different mind after a couple of years have kind of passed. And one of the first things that I did that I kind of contribute to this was I became very uninterested in materialism. I was always a bit of a minimalist inside the poker world. And as you can imagine, when you're going out and gambling and drinking and you have all these things going on, there's a lot of money being spent and thrown around and travel and flying, and buying things that you don't necessarily need, and I came to the conclusion that I just didn't need this in my life. So one of the first things that I did was I started slowly selling and giving away all my material possessions. And I had an apartment at the time, and I gave away all my things, and I had a couple things left that I left at my parents'. I can still remember, like, I had this beautiful queen bed, which I kind of wish I had right now. And it was like the last thing that I had left, and I was leaving my apartment the next day. So I started messaging, throwing it out there. I was trying to sell it at first, and then I just left it there, and someone got it. But I slowly got rid of all these different possessions, and my plan was to travel the world. So I didn't know how long I was going to go for. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that this was kind of the next step. So I went and I visited my brothers in the Caymans. Then I got dive certified in Utila in Honduras. Then I went over to Europe, and I was still playing poker at this time, but I was slowly starting to spend a lot less time playing poker and a lot more time diving into self-study, performing what I now call life experiments. And unconsciously, I kind of started just putting myself through these different tests, different experiences, because I knew they would force me to grow. So I still remember leaving Cayman because that was the first time in my life that I was going to be traveling alone. And I purposely set it up this way because I wanted to conquer the fear of approaching people. I've always been slightly introverted, slightly shy, and I knew that this was going to force me outside my comfort zone. And whenever you're forced outside your comfort zone, there's only going to be room for growth. So I have no possessions. I've left all the people I know. I'm in a completely unknown territory. I started off in France, and then I went to Italy, Amsterdam. I would meet friends in different points in times. So I'd spend like a month alone. Then I'd meet a friend and play a poker tournament. Then they would go back home. I'd spend another month alone. I'd meet a different friend. And this kind of continued for about a year. But I developed probably the most in my life during this point in time because I was forced to develop. I'm actually creating a video called The 5 Reasons You Should Travel Alone. And this is one of the main reasons. It's because you are forced outside your comfort zone. If you don't want to spend time alone, you're going to have to go and approach people, talk to people, whether they are going to be these friends, whether they're going to be women. You're going to have to go up to them and speak your mind and talk to them. So this is really where I developed this ability to do that. Like I said, I was very introverted and very in my mind. And meditation is something that helps you really get outside of your mind. And I was beginning to experience what that was like. And I think it's important as well because I'm saying poker, and maybe a lot of you can't relate to that. But I'm sure what you can relate to is using your mind. So if you're an engineer, or you're like a mathematician, or most jobs really do have you using your mind, some more than others. But in poker, you are constantly analyzing, constantly problem solving, constantly calculating the odds that you're getting, constantly observing people, trying to determine their psychology and what they're trying to have you do. And there's this big mind game going on. It's a very big mind game, and that's why I love it, because I love using the mind. But it's important to understand that if you're always using your mind and you're not allowing it rest, then it's not going to serve you as best as it can. So I began having all these small little realizations. And one of them was that in poker, you are always problem solving. You're always trying to figure out the maximum benefit, the maximum best possible way that you can play this hand in order to gain the most chips. And that is how I was looking at life, and I always thought that this was a huge strength of mine. And it really is, being able to understand statistics, understand psychology, understand things that are going to help you make the best decisions possible in life is extremely important. But what I didn't realize was everything in life became a problem to be solved, because that's just what I'm doing day in and day out. And whatever we do day in and day out tends to kind of bleed into other aspects of our life. So this was happening in relationships. This was happening in going to the grocery store and buying organic celery or regular celery, calculating the best profit and how long this is going to last and how many grams. Everything became a little problem to be solved. And I kind of began to realize, I'm creating problems just to solve them. And this was a very huge realization for me. And once I began to really get into meditation and slowly drift away from poker, my mind kind of finally got some rest, and that was extremely beneficial. And other kind of things that I began to put myself through to test myself, other than just traveling alone. I practiced life without money. I'd spent so long chasing it, so I really wanted to experience what it was like to not have money. So one of the first ways I did this was I went to Costa Rica, and I saw how long I could last off $500. And I ate extremely frugally. I remember one of the first decisions was after I got off the plane, the place that I was going after I spent a couple days in the main city there, I was going to La Fortuna. And this was, I don't quite remember, but maybe 12 hours away. And the drive was going to cost the majority of my money was going to be these people picking me up and getting there. And I remember just thinking there's got to be another way. And I went and I talked to locals. I ended up walking for hours, and then I would catch a bus, and I ended up spending $10 to get there instead of $300. And just kind of realizing A, that there's other ways to do things in life, but B, I really enjoyed the journey of getting there. Some people hear that and they're like, oh my God, you got to walk all these hours. But it was extremely enjoyable, and I always looked at it as a positive. So when I was walking, I was working out. I met so many interesting people, and so I had so many interesting conversations. And the lesson that this whole process kind of taught me was that I didn't need money to be happy, and that I can create my own happiness. And this was one example of practicing poverty, as I call it. Another one was when I got home, I didn't work for, I don't even remember how long, it was quite a long time. And I wanted to just see what I would naturally do without poker. So you can put whatever your XYZ is in place in this, whatever you do for 8 hours every day. I was playing poker every single day, sometimes for 12 hours a day. And I was curious to, who am I? That's really what this whole journey was, right? Who am I? And meditation can guide you towards that answer, or towards just the exploration of the question of who you are. And when I started just observing myself, okay, you don't have this thing anymore. What are you going to do with your time? How are you going to spend your time? And I really started to understand who I was, because I really enjoyed cooking. One of the very few ways that I did spend money, other than on food, of course, was every Tuesday was cheap movie day at the movie theaters. So I would go to Shuby Park, I would go for these long hikes, and I would usually smoke or eat a firecracker, and I'd just be working on ideas. I'd be thinking, I'd be putting them in my phone, and I call these thought experiments. I was just having different experiments in my mind. And then I would go and I would watch a movie, and these became my very favorite days. So the things that I had that brought me happiness, that I didn't need money to do, or not much in some cases, was cooking food, making a good meal, having these thought experiments, watching movies. Then I began creating movies. That's what, somewhere between this is when I started my YouTube channel. And it made me realize too, like, sometimes you have to go and suck at something. So if you watch my earlier videos, they're not that great. It's me just sticking a phone in the tree, and I made so many that I haven't even posted because I was like, this is chaos. And even just the process of making YouTube videos and starting a podcast, which I just recently did, is you get to replay these things and watch who you are. So all of these testimonies, trials, rituals that I kind of put myself through, and there's a whole lot that I'm not mentioning here, but I see that my battery is going to die very shortly, so I'm going to try to wrap things up here, is they're all in some way, shape, or form based upon answering the question of, who am I? And meditation has allowed me to dive deep into answering that question, figuring it out, and completely restructuring my life. So I still play poker here and there. It's still part of my life, but I'm not completely obsessed with it the way I was. And there is something to be said that if you want to be successful at something, that you should obsess over it. But I developed a different kind of perspective of life after going through these processes, after going to Amazon jungle, dieting ayahuasca, living with 5 shamans, the list goes on and on. Started Wim Hof method, doing cold exposure. But all of these things have been me developing a relationship with my mind and a relationship with my life, trying to figure out, how do I want to live life? Because once you figure out how you want to live life, then you just have to monetize it. And I think what's really important, and I know a lot of people can't do this, but this is one of the benefits that I saw of COVID, of people being in quarantine and kind of trapped inside, is you're kind of trapped inside with your mind, you're stuck there. You might as well kind of perform some of these experiments on your own and figure out what you like and what you don't like. And a beautiful way to begin is through meditation. So I know I went on a bit of a tangent there and I talked about a lot of different things, but that is how meditation has really changed and shifted my entire life. If I just look at my life before meditation and then after, it's drastically different, and my relationship with myself is drastically different. Sorry, the camera just shut off there, and it looks like it is time since I'm getting the red dot. So I just want to say thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe for more videos. I got a lot of interesting projects coming out. Like I said, I just began a podcast, and the other part of that whole journey that I went on was I learned that I really love having deep and meaningful conversations with people. That's what I hope to bring to this channel. So, peace out for now.